Good afternoon, all. Let's work it out. Work it out. I feel like I moved into an apartment that's got one less room that we needed, but it's okay. We shall survive. We've made it through so much. For those who are interested, my sister is in the Schwab rehabilitation home right now, so she's being worked on to get her back from the stroke, physical therapy as well as speech therapy. And we require continued prayer in that area, obviously. Some other issues, but I'll deal with those personally. We're up here again. I don't know what was going on downstairs, but hopefully it was successful for them. It was certainly interesting for us, but it is what it is. The world being what it is, we'll just drop anchor and give you the title before we do that. It's all in the form of a question, one that's been asked many times, but in my years in the churches of God, we've never really gotten that answer that we deserved, or the one that gives you enlightenment anyway. We won't even get into the concept of deserving, and I hear those commercials, they come on, oh, you deserve, and I'm sure God is sitting somewhere, I know what you deserve. But we won't go there either. But the question is, did Yeshua preach to spirits in hell? It's a question that has gone on and on and on, and the answers I heard were, I don't know, I don't agree with that completely, but I decided to sit down and put some work into it this week, and it may not be the answer, but it's a better one than I've heard coming out of our people, if you will. And that's not to say that this is the right answer. I'm not even going to say let's just say it's the answer that comes at you when you challenge the scriptures as they're intended. Dropping anchor, let's go to 1 Peter, the 3rd chapter, 18th verse, to get started. For Messiah also once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, indeed being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which also he went and preached to the spirits in prison. Well, it's there, so now it's got to be dealt with. So let's deal with it. Now, according to Scripture, human history covers a period of roughly 6,000 years. The first epoch of mankind lasted less than 2,000 years, punctuated at its end by the worst global disaster humanity has ever seen, the flood of Noah. Something more than 2,000 years of history followed this before the coming of the Son of Man, or Yeshua Messiah. And since then, about 2,000 years have elapsed. It only takes a little thought to determine that the gospel of the kingdom of God, as described by Messiah himself, has been preached only to the last third of human history. And that preaching, as we all know, divided us into about 5,000 different churches and about who knows how many denominations and how many schisms within all of those denominations, within all of those churches. Heck, inside some of these buildings you'll find fisticuffs over Bible studies. It is what it is. But certainly, salvation in the name of Yeshua Messiah has been available only since his crucifixion nearly 2 millennia ago. And most people struggle with that. Let's continue. Acts, the 4th chapter, the 11th verse, where it explains his role in this. Acts, the 4th chapter, the 11th verse, where it says, "This is the stone which you builders have counted worthless. And he has become the head of the corner. And there is salvation in no other one, for there is no other name under heaven given among men by which we must be saved," which makes it so fascinating that the name was translated and mistranslated, but the mistranslation has become the name that everyone uses. You see, it would appear that God's plan was set up to fail by Satan from day one. Yet somehow, as that whenever the truth comes forward, people tend to want to argue about it, or they want to hang on to the old lies because the lies came first. It's a fascinating thing to watch how all of these things begin to come together, but this study became very fascinating to me because of just how little information is there about it, but how much factual information is available. That availability makes it interesting, but people's refusal to deal with it has more to do with denomination than truth. While the greater part of humanity, as I said, has lived during the last third of its history, millions, maybe even billions of individuals lived before Christ, before the gospel was preached, before our Creator's inestimably marvelous act of self-sacrifice was given for us. This doesn't even consider the many millions of people since that time who have never heard Yeshua's name or that other name, Jesus, or the gospel preached, or God's offer. They've not even heard God's offer of salvation and eternal life to them. For any reasonable concerned individual, this fact alone generates disturbing questions, many that we don't like to deal with, but the question always comes up in these side conversations. Did God withhold the opportunity for salvation from these people? Are they lost? And they come up with their own answers, and from that answer they say, God's not fair. How can you worship a God that's not fair? Well, God is fair. But only through this study will you realize just how fair he's been. But you see, these are the questions that scoffers and even some denominational Christian theologians ask often. Most of them, if subscribing to the stock heaven and hell ideology taught in most Sunday school classes, they can come up with no satisfactory answer to this dilemma. Why? Because they don't have this answer. But they want to come up with one, but what they walk away doing is essentially condemning untold billions to their hellfire, which burns forever and ever and ever and ever. And that's why they say, oh, you all are wrong because your God didn't show everybody. He didn't give everybody a chance. Therefore, he's not fair. Instead of considering that maybe our denominational excesses of doctrine are improper and maybe don't encompass the entire book, just the part that you like or the part that you know or understand, which makes it a little bit more interesting, but it doesn't make it any more real. That's our attempt today, is to pull people out of that ever-burning hellfire and maybe even pull them out of some shady, shadowy Hades and put them in a proper perspective. But some of them realize this, and they realizing it, and that they find callousness in it, and they find that this is not the attitude of a God of love. So they continue to advance their highly creative but non-factual theories of salvation after the fact, for the lost dead. You hear people talking about how you can pray for your dead relatives and such to try to justify their nearsightedness in terms of the totality of Scripture. But you see, for these scholars, 1 Peter 3:18 through 22 is a very difficult passage, and it answers the question of how God deals with some of these things and with some of those people who have never heard the gospel or had a chance, but it doesn't deal with it the way they would like to. Let's go back again to 1 Peter, the 3rd chapter, the 18th verse, where it says, "For Messiah also once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, indeed being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit, in which also he went and preached to the spirits in prison." Here it goes again. "To disobeying ones who once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is, 8 souls, were saved through water. Which figures now also saves us. Baptism, not a putting away of the filth of the flesh, but the answer of a good conscience toward God, by the resurrection of Yeshua Messiah, who is at the right hand of God, having gone into heaven, where the angels and authorities and powers are being subjected to him. However, under close scrutiny, this passage does not support these theologians' arguments. They think it does, but it doesn't. Why? Dead is dead. Put very simply, dead is dead. Keep that in your mind. The context of Peter's thought actually runs through 1 Peter, the 4th chapter, the 6th verse. Let's turn there and you'll put a little bit more flesh on this and it'll begin to make sense to us. Because it's an interesting little study in just 2 or 3 little passages, but you have to dissect these passages properly or you run into some real problems that largely mainstream theology has a real problem with. 1 Peter, the 4th chapter, the 6th verse, where it says, "For to this end the gospel was preached also to the dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit." Once again, hey, how do you preach to the dead? Answer coming up. You see, as Bibles are written, a lot of these little split passages, as you put them back together through reading them in sequence, you realize that the apostle is speaking about the efficacy of Messiah's suffering and death in making possible a relationship between God and human being. His conclusion, beginning in 1 Peter 4, the 4th chapter, the 1st verse, is that since Messiah suffered so much to bring this about, believers or Christians should respond by ceasing from sin and living for the will of God. But that comes into understanding and hearing the truth preached. An iffy process, if ever there was one. Go back a little bit, a little here, a little there. 1 Peter, the 4th chapter, stay there, the 1st verse. Let's go back a little bit, just roll back just a little bit. Where it says, "Therefore, Yeshua, having suffered for us in the flesh, also you arm yourselves with the same thought, that he suffering in the flesh had been made to rest from sin, in order no longer to live in the lusts of men, but in the will of God. The remaining time of the flesh for the time of life which is past is enough for us to have worked out the will of the nations, having gone on in lasciviousness, gone on in lusts, excess of wine, parties, carousing, and abominable idolatries. In these things they are surprised that you are not running with them in the same excess of riot, blaspheming. But they shall give account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For to this end the gospel was preached also to the dead, that they might be judged according to men in the flesh, but live according to God in the spirit. Wait a minute, how do the dead live? Now we're starting to run into the problem and see it for what it is. This means, of course, that in doing so, we no longer live as we used to. Like the Gentiles, as they say, like the world, as it says in verse 3. Seeing this, our friends who are still in the world wonder why our lives have changed so drastically. And they're likely to malign us for it. How many of you have been through that? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But we need not worry, because God, the just judge, will bring them into account for their abuses of us. Verse 5. In verse 6, he winds up his discussion by providing a general example to give us hope in this regard. He explains that the gospel had been preached in the past to people who are now dead. Now does it make sense? He said that those who were dead. He said no. It was preached to them while they were alive, but they are now dead. And even though their contemporaries may have judged them worthy to die or to suffer death and persecution, God, on the other hand, has judged them worthy of eternal life. He implies that God would do the same for us. Having read what Peter writes in 1 Peter 3:19 about spirits, in which also he went and preached to the spirits in heaven, we're going to deal with that. Many have assumed that the dead in 1 Peter 4:6 are the souls of dead people who are theologically lost in terms of salvation. However, this is not the case. In fact, the only real connection between the spirits in prison and those who are dead is the fact that in this particular verse, they appear in the same paragraph. In taking the latter verse apart and seeing it in the flow of the apostles' thought, one realizes that the dead are individuals who actually heard the gospel at some point while they were alive, embraced it, and suffered as a result of it, and died for it, whom God accounted worthy of eternal life. Therefore, since they are not the lost dead, 1 Peter 4:6 is not a clarification of 1 Peter 3:19 and the spirits in prison, as is often supposed, to whom then did Yeshua preach in 1 Peter 3:19. Now we get closer to what we want. One significant foundational point must be made, however, before going any further. Yeshua could not have preached to anyone, dead or alive, while he was dead and laying in the tomb. Let's not forget that. That's the key to the whole thing. He could not preach to anyone if he truly died. Why? Because he's dead. Simple. But it's the simple stuff that we get tripped up on. I hear songs all the time about how he went to hell and preached and did this and did that and all these things they talk about he did. And I wonder, do they believe he's a savior? Because if he never died, as some do teach, and some do actually teach that he was not really dead, that he was just moving around and doing things in spirit and preaching to saints below and going up and doing this and basically just having a good old party time while he was supposed to be dead. No. And not possible. You see, if he was alive during those 3 days and 3 nights, the question becomes very valid: who died for us? Who died for us? You see, if he was not dead during those 3 days and 3 nights in the hearts of the earth, how do you explain Matthew, the 24th chapter, the 40th verse? Let's go there for a second, because you got to explain that one away if you're going to say that. Matthew, the 12th chapter, the 40th verse, where it says, "For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the huge fish, so the Son of Man shall be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." If this is not true, his sacrifice for the sins of humanity was in vain. And we don't have a Savior. You see, Scripture says that when Yeshua died on the cross, like all men, his spirit returned to God who gave it. Let's go to Ecclesiastes, the 12th chapter, the 7th verse. Ecclesiastes, the 12th chapter, the 7th verse. If he didn't die, what's the point? Then the dust shall return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return to God who gave it. Need more? Let's go to Matthew, the 27th chapter, the 50th verse. Matthew, the 27th chapter, the 50th verse, where it says, and crying again with a loud voice, Yeshua yielded up his spirit, which we all know means he died. No game playing here, just straightforward. But if you need more, Luke, the 23rd chapter, the 46th verse. This is the way we do it. We try to explain by letting the Bible explain the Bible. Then we don't have to deal with, oh, well, we think. No, we know. Or should we say the book knows, and we have to get to that point where we understand. Luke, the 23rd chapter, the 46th verse, where it says, then Yeshua calling out with a loud voice and said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. He didn't say I'm going to go and dance around and run and do this and do that. He says, I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last. Need more? Some do. John, the 19th chapter, the 28th verse. After this, being conscious that all things had now been done so that the writings might be true, Yeshua said, give me water. And notice what they did. He asked for water. Now there was a vessel ready full of bitter wine, and they put a sponge full of it on a stick and put it to his mouth. He asked for water. What did they give him? Vinegar. Bitter wine. Oh, they must have really loved this guy, huh? Yeah, considering that those Roman soldiers, they're lucky that they didn't, well, they did eventually do that too, but the spirit and the side I would have expected here, but it happened eventually. Verse 30, so when Yeshua had taken the wine, he said, all is done, and with his head bent, he gave up his spirit. The spirit of a human is not conscious in death. For Solomon tells us plainly that the dead know nothing. You go to Ecclesiastes, the 9th chapter, the 5th verse, it says that very plainly. Thus, the spirit of the dead person cannot do anything. There is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. Verse 10 says, note that this is the truth. But if you go in and you need more, let's go to Psalms, the 146th chapter, the 4th verse. Psalms, 146th chapter, the 4th verse, where it says, his breath goes forth. He returns to the earth. In that very day, his thoughts and obviously any actions perish. Need more? Job, the 14th chapter, the 20th verse. Job, the 14th chapter, the 20th verse, where it says, you overcome him forever and he is gone. His face is changed in death, and you send him away. His sons come to honor, and he has no knowledge of it. Speaking of the dead person. They are made low, but he is not conscious of it. Need more? Okay. Psalms, the 104th chapter, the 29th verse. Psalms, the 104th chapter, the 29th verse, where it says, if your face is veiled, they are troubled. When you take away their breath, they come to an end and go back to the dust. Yeshua, in order to taste death like every man, had to go back to the dust. and had to die. No spiritual death and within the spirit flew around and did this and did that. No. Hebrews, the 2nd chapter, the 9th verse. Hebrews, the 2nd chapter, the 9th verse, where it says, "But we see Yeshua, who was made a little lower than the angels for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he, by the grace of God, should taste death for all." That should be it. That should do it. You see, he had to die just as every man dies in order to die for every man. He was completely dead for 3 days and 3 nights. He was without life, without consciousness of any kind, both in body and in spirit. He had to be recalled by the Father. He had to be raised from the dead by the Father according to the plan. He couldn't just go off on his own, as many, you hear a lot of people say that the dead, oh no, we're spirits. Spirits are eternal. God does not create anything that he doesn't have an off switch for. Don't ever forget that. He could therefore do no preaching to anyone, much less to spirits in prison, whoever they are. So now the question has been dangled for so long, so maybe it's time for an answer. Who are these spirits in prison? Now, as I mentioned before, this passage, 1 Peter 3, particularly verses 19 through 20, are kind of difficult to translate from Greek to English because there's so much levity in the Greek language in terms of what words mean. And these 9 Greek words in verse 19 can be translated in so many different shades of meaning that they make interpretation a little bit tricky, and people that will try to add to it what they want have basically trashed the process. They've trashed the process and made it very tricky for those who go behind them, because anyone that has 5 degrees, he's the winner in terms of the world's concept of how this thing goes. Oh, he's put the most work into it. He's got 4 PhDs, so he must be right. So everybody follows him. However, if you go back and do your best of translating them in the most basic meanings, and that's the best way to do it. Don't try to run through a maze with it. Just figure out that's the first one. This one makes sense within this context, so we'll go with this. And you find that by doing it this way, very basically, you find thus, he says, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. It says something different. But you see, the which is what? Forgot the Greek, but we'll get to that. There is a study that coming with this. But the word which, in which verse 19 probably refers back to spirit, its closest antecedent in verse 18 suggests that Yeshua was no longer in the flesh, but by this time had been changed into spirit, which means this was after the 3 days, or it was another time period altogether. And that's the most logical way to look at this. That he wasn't talking about the time of his 3 days and 3 nights, but it had happened previously. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting somewhere. You see, this follows the historical chain of events in order from the preceding verse. He suffered, died, and was resurrected, and was thus changed to spirit, leading to the next key words, he went. What happened next in the gospel record after his resurrection to spirit? What did Yeshua do after arising from the dead after 3 days? We're not even going to talk about when he went to Mary and says, don't touch me. There was a reason for that, because he hadn't gone to the Father yet to be glorified. Some suggest that he revealed himself to his disciples, which he did. later, but not by any stretch of meaning could it be described in coming back to talk to the disciples as being proclaiming anything to imprisoned spirits. The disciples were certainly not imprisoned spirits. No, John tells us through the words of Yeshua himself to Mary Magdalene what the next momentous occurrence was. He says, "Go to my brethren and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God." John the 20th chapter, the 17th verse, if you don't know. When Yeshua went, he ascended in glory to the right hand of the Father in heaven. At this point, we will probably be better off to skip that phrase, spirits in prison. Not saying it doesn't matter, but it's entirely possible that it was a mistranslation. First, though, let us note that the Bible does not refer to human beings who have died as being imprisoned in any way. Not even those who have rebelled against and rejected God. They still must be judged. Therefore, they can't be condemned or spoken in condemnatory language as yet. God doesn't allow that. We like to do it because it makes us, we like to raise ourselves up by stepping on somebody else's back. It's just the way we are as people. It's just the way it is. But it doesn't work that way with God. All things in order, in decent order. But you see, what may have been the issue here, it may be that when someone is said to be destroyed or killed or cut off or sent to Sheol, which is a pit or a grave, they're not imprisoned. They're just in a grave. But you see, as we saw earlier in Ecclesiastes 3:19, humans who die return to the dust of which they came from. That's not necessarily a prison. That's just the natural order of things. You live, you die, you're buried, that's it. You're not imprisoned. For whatever it's worth, they could dig you up at any time and take you off somewhere, but what good is that going to do you? That body is of no use to you, especially if you're going to come up in the first resurrection. What use is it of you? If you're going to come up in the second, it's still of no use to you, because God will give you another one according to his needs. That one may never be used. Personally, if you look at what they do with the body now in embalming, it's of no use anyway. They wire you shut. If you could actually see what goes into that, you realize that that body is of no use to anyone anyway. You're going to probably be given a brand new one, because this one is wired and tired and tight. Everything is cut and ripped out of it, and it's just gross to think about, but it is what it is. That body, think of it as gone. Even for those coming up in the second resurrection, they're not going to come up in that thing. No, God gives you a new one. Matter of fact, it'll be better than that one. If you've got a bad heart, the new one is going to be great. If you had a leg cut off, you can have it replaced. It is what it is. And when you really deal with the whole of how God works in totality, it makes everything that we think of as miraculous here just parlor tricks, just a joke. Very sad, but it is what it is. But notice in Genesis, the 3rd chapter, the 19th verse, what talks of the body. In the sweat of your face, he was talking to Adam. What would happen to you after you've done this? In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Now that's what happens to a human being. However, the Bible speaks in several different places about spirit beings. Because they're of a different substance, they have to be handled differently. And there's only one person. We're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll go there. 2 Peter, the 2nd chapter, the 4th verse. Sometimes I get so excited and want to tell you, but I say, well, it'll come to you. We'll get there. It's here. For if God did not spare sinning angels, but thrust them down into Tartarus and delivered them into chains of darkness, being reserved to judgment, and he did not spare the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth one, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. Peter again here, notice, refers to two events in this same breath. The bringing down of these angels, but also talks of this happening or somewhere around the time of Noah's flood. Again, he links these two events and links this preaching to angels to this period. Jude also reveals that angels will be set away or hidden away until the day of judgment. So they will be judged. And in another place it even says that we will judge angels. Jude, the first chapter, the 6th verse. Jude, the first chapter, the 6th verse, where it says, and those angels not having kept their first place, but having deserted their dwelling place, he has kept in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of a great day. Even their leader eventually will be imprisoned further. And we'll find out that to a degree, he's in prison now. Revelation, the 20th chapter, the 1st verse. Revelation, the 20th chapter, the 1st verse, where it says, and I saw an angel come down from heaven having the key of the abyss, or Tartarus, and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent who is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. Whoa. And he cast him into the abyss and shut him up and set a seal on him, that he should deceive the nations no more until the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that he must be loosed for a little season. That's after the 1,000 years, to try and test those people that have come through 1,000 years of millennium under God in pureness. And surely you know how we are. No matter how settled and how happy we are in this place, if somebody comes up, wow, I got something new for you. Come check this out. It'll give you power. It'll give you more power than you've got under that guy. Do you honestly think that everybody's going to look at him and say, No. Just as when he made the offer to the angels, or who are now demons, some of them took him up on it. It makes sense that when he makes the offer to humans, they're going to do the same thing. Oh yeah, we can get a better deal. Let's go do this. And he'll do it the same way he's always done it. He's going to offer you right now something that you would have gotten in time anyway. But you know, we're so impatient. We're so unwilling to wait. We're so sure that if we get it now, we can do more than we did when we get it now. He don't want us to have it now. He don't want us to. Leave that alone. Leave that alone. That's the best advice I can give you today. Be patient and wait for what's coming. Rebellious angels, unlike mortal humans, must be imprisoned, because angels or demons, being composed of spirit, do not naturally die as humans do. They can only be killed by the Father or Yeshua. And this is known, but many who don't study believe that angels cannot be killed. It's been taught for years. We've even heard it around here. You can't kill Satan. No, you can't. In that particular sentence, he's absolutely right. No, I can't kill him. No, you can't kill him. God can. And that's the difference. But they live in fallacy, believing that angels live on forever, which is one of the things that they dangle in front of many Wiccans and others who say that Satan rules, and because God can't kill him. So no matter what happens, we'll still be around. Wrong. Got to do it again. Let's try something different, because that doesn't work. This is a fallacy. It is a joke. It is wrong. It is improper. I can't say it any stronger than that. You see, the angels who sinned, Peter and Jude say they were cast down to Tartarus, a place of restraint, a prison, where they are bound until God judges them. This Tartarus, this hell where the demons are restrained, is in other places referred to as their first estate. And this is where people get tripped up, because what was their first estate? What was the first assignment that Satan was sent to? Anybody? What was his first assignment? Give her a cookie. That's it. His first assignment was earth. There's a guy, I think, who is it? Alex Jones calls this the prison planet. He has no idea how right he is. He has no idea how right he is. It is said in so many places that they were limited to their first estate. Or in other places they call it their proper domain. Earth. Earth. The original, if you will, prison planet. Please notice these scriptures. Let's go to Ezekiel, the 28th chapter, the 17th verse. Ezekiel, the 28th chapter, the 17th verse. We don't like to think about it like that, because we like to think, oh, the earth is a wonderful place. It's a wonderful place if we had left it the way God intended it. If not, it's a prison planet. You ever just, if you ever, anytime you think it's not a prison planet and you're not a slave, call your boss and say, I'm going to take about a week off. I need to go and look at some things. I don't have to tell you what's going to happen after that. Not only to you, but probably over time to your bank account. If it's anything like mine, you don't have 6 weeks of money saved up to go travel. Most of us don't. It's a prison planet. Ezekiel, the 28th chapter, the 17th verse. Your heart was lifted up, speaking of Satan, because of your beauty. You have spoiled your wisdom because of your brightness. I will cast you to the ground. I will put you before kings that they may behold you. You can't go anywhere but there. It's a prison for you too. You can make them think it's something different. You can make people think it's wonderful. But it's still, you can't move. And as long as you're their king, they really can't either. Revelation, the 12th chapter, the 7th verse. Revelation, the 12th chapter, the 7th verse, where it says, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels warring against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels warred, but did not prevail. Nor was place found for them in heaven anymore. So where did they go? And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast out into, the earth. And his angels were cast out with him. Now, some demons, yes, they are bound until judgment. But others are free to roam. They're free to roam the earth. If you don't believe it, just look at almost anything that's going on out here. When the demons are in charge, the police can shoot you in the back running and get away with it. When the demons are in charge, They can pollute the water of a city and make money off of it, and then when people start dying, then and only then does somebody say, let's do something about it. But has anyone grabbed the governor and said, let's put him in jail? No. And they probably won't. Don't be surprised by that. This is, after all, Satan's world, and what is his primary goal here? Rob, steal, and let's not forget that. It's real. But as I said, some demons are bound into a judgment, but others are free to roam the earth or stalk the earth. What did it say in some place else? That he is a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. While he's on, if you will, house arrest. Just something to think about. Consequently, the further we stray from the protection of God, the more influence Satan and his hordes of demons are allowed to project onto our lives. The world is already his. This is provable. 1 John, the 5th chapter, the 19th verse. You see, we're so, they want to run you through a line and say, oh no, take one scripture and run over here with it and run over there. There are some that link together, and there are other whole passages that pull them together and proves these things. 1 John, the 5th chapter, the 19th verse says very plainly, we know that we are of God, and all the world lies in evil. Now, there are some people who would say, oh, not the United States. We're going to be the first. No. No. You get that out your mind. We're going to collapse just like everybody else. Matter of fact, our fall might be more precipitous because we rose ourselves higher and did more of Satan's work in the process. Don't think it's not going to happen. It is. John, the 14th chapter, the 30th verse. And these are the words of Christ. They are in red. I shall no longer speak many things with you, for the ruler of this world comes, and he has nothing in me. And he's very, very, very obvious who he was talking about, Satan. Need more? Ephesians, the 6th chapter, the 12th verse, where it says, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the world's rulers of the darkness of this age, and it is getting darker by the day, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Everybody ran, oh, it's so great that he's the president. Your president presided 2 weeks ago. I'm having New Year's Eve night. They called Congress back in, and they sat there and voted 2 things through. While we all were out, those of us who do that, hopefully nobody here was out on New Year's Eve bringing in the new year. While we were bringing in the new year, you know what they were bringing in? A bill that says that the GMOs don't have to be labeled. Not only do they not have to be labeled, but when they put food in the store, they no longer have to tell you where it came from. You see, many believe that this present world is the kingdom of God. It is not. It is ruled and run by Satan. The present state of it proves this. Look around you. What in this present state is positive? What in this present state exudes life? The air is polluted. I saw a video from a lady in China who was walking down the street, and she coughed into her hand, and the phlegm was black. And that's just the air in this particular Chinese city. The air is polluted. The water is toxic. We've all heard about Flint, Michigan. Of course, we who follow it remember Flint, Michigan, first of all, as being the place where cars were made and fortunes were stolen. If anybody remembers the old, I think it was I forget who did that movie on Flint, Michigan years ago. So Flint's had problems for a long time. This has just been coming on. Over the times after the cars and everything moved out and there was no real manufacturing or anything there, the city is basically poor anyway. So basically the attitude was, they're poor, who cares? If they die, what difference does it make? And there's even a video floating around now where the Congress people were sitting around and laughing about how, well, let them die. That's what we got to pay for. That video is going viral as we stand here. It's fascinating how evil this world is if you really sit down and put it under a microscope and deal honestly with it. But as I said, the water is toxic because we allow businesses to dump poisons into it and merely pay a fine instead of saying stop. There's so much technology now that you can basically reverse this to nothing, but it costs a lot of money to start it up. But nobody wants to spend that on them. You pick your own them. We all have one. Others, companies, will soon be allowed to pollute endlessly and simply pay, what did Gore call it, a carbon tax. A carbon tax to the UN. In other words, you can pollute all you want, just give us some money. Give us a tax, and you can pollute all you want. But yeah, if you pollute all you want, eventually, but you see, now we understand why that canopy came down in the beginning. Imagine if that canopy was still up there by now and millions of cars driving and driving and driving and driving. It would be like being in the world's biggest garage with the door closed and the motor running. Eventually, we would all die. The way things are going now, even with no top there, it may still happen. I think about that lady in China, and I'm sure she's not the only one. But we don't want to hear about anything about anywhere else because they're just demonic communists and they don't, forget about politics first of all. It's a big club. And how did somebody say a long time ago? Y'all ain't in it. Y'all ain't in it. So don't expect them to do anything for you because you're not in the club. I could go on for another hour about that, but anyone who still watches the news and believes that, oh, they would warn us if we don't, they'll warn us if it gets too bad. Yeah, right. Anybody that trusts these people is naive at best. And I'll leave it right there, for the rest is just not kind. Anyone who still trusts the media heads, I feel for you. But I suggest find somebody else to listen to because they're lying to you. But getting back to what we're talking about, Peter's use of spirits is consistent with its use in the Gospels. Matthew, the 8th chapter, the 16th verse. Matthew, the 8th chapter, the 16th verse, where it says, "In evening coming on, they brought to him many who had been possessed with demons. And he cast out the spirit with a word and healed all who were sick." Matthew, the 12th chapter, the 45th verse. Matthew, the 12th chapter, the 45th verse, where it says, "Then he goes and takes with him," speaking of a man who had been cleansed of a demon, but went back. He said, "Then he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits more evil than himself. And they enter in and live there, and the last state of that man is worse than the first, even as it shall be to this evil generation." Mark, the 3rd chapter, the 11th verse. "And unclean spirits, when they saw him, they fell down and before him and cried, saying, "You are the Son of God." So he has power over them. And as long as we are in his power, we have power over them and they can't touch us. So, as I said before, we have to remain close to God. Then no matter how many demons are around us, even in this room watching, we are safe. As long as we do the right things, they can't touch us. Luke, the 11th chapter, the 24th verse. When the unclean spirit has gone out of a man, he walks through dry places seeking rest. And finding none, he says, "I will return to my house from which I came out." Wow, they cleaned it up for me. Let's go back. Matter of fact, let's take some friends. And when he comes out, he finds it swept and decorated, and he goes and takes 7 other spirits more wicked than himself. Party. And entering in, they dwell there, and the last state of the man is worse than the first. Whatever he was doing after he was cleansed, he went back to it, apparently. It gets back to that whole thing about doing something and then go back and repent of it, go back and repent of it, go back. At some point, you got to stop. At some point, you've got to go back and rethink this thing out and say, wait a minute, I can't do this anymore. And you got to shut that sin down, whatever it is. Because every time you clean it out, every time you pray, every time someone prays over you, every time someone lays hands on you and that thing goes away, it's clean. But every time you go back, it gets worse. I'll say that about anyone, whether it be drugs, whether it be alcohol, whether it be sex, whether it be porn, whatever it is. Every time you go back, that grip is a little bit tighter. And you have a little bit more of a problem getting yourself free of it. And this scripture proves that. And he goes out and takes 7 spirits more wicked than himself, and entering in, they dwell there. And the last state of the man is worse than the first. You see, in the Gospels, spirits consistently denote evil spirits or demons or wicked spirits. It is highly likely that Peter refers to demons in 1 Peter, the 3rd chapter, the 19th verse. You see, this is confirmed by the first phrase of verse 20, who formerly were disobedient and who disobeyed long ago. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting somewhere. Peter is speaking of a time in deep antiquity, a time when the flood, before the flood perhaps. He does not intend us to think of Satan's original sin of rebellion against God, although it may be included in his thought. But since we can't read his mind, let's not go too far down that road. But specifically, he was speaking of the demon's corruption of mankind between the creation and the flood. This would explain his time marker in the next phrase, when God waited patiently in the days of Noah until the ark was being built. He had plans for what would happen once that ark was built. You see, in Satan's sin, only the demons themselves were affected. They were the ones who run amok. Those were the ones who went with him and went into rebellion. But when they corrupted mankind, human beings who were potential sons of God were then affected. Once men and women began sinning under the influence of Satan and his demon hordes, the sacrificial death of Yeshua Messiah became necessary. It wasn't something that came out of the back of his pocket. Oh, well, let's do it. It was planned from day one. If this happens, we'll do this. Anybody that plans anything, you always have a plan to say, if this goes wrong, we'll do this. This was that plan. Peter's point then is that though the wicked spirits seem to be so successful in corrupting mankind, God patiently waited during Noah's 120-year ministry to save only 8 people by bringing them through the flood. delivering them through a kind of baptism. Again, notice, now God never changes. We like to change, think it's cool. Noah and his family, when they went into the ark, they didn't close the door just closed. Then the waters came, everybody died, and Noah and his family were baptized aboard the ark, symbolically floating above the waters. Notice again, the Hebrews escaping Egypt, walking through the congealed waters of the Red Sea, and they were baptized as walking on dry land between the waters and saved and untouched. Yet, once they got to the other side and Pharaoh's men tried to do it, well, they didn't get baptized. Let's just say they got dunked. Let's just say they got dunked. Just as we are baptized in water, and then the Spirit is prayed for, and the laying on of hands is paid upon us, and we get Spirit. You see, God never changes. Only we do, but under the influence of Satan and his demons. The demons had failed to destroy mankind because 8 of them got away. So also by having Yeshua crucified, the demons thought again they had won. But through the resurrection, Yeshua had the victory instead. Baptism is type of this same victory, as it is a symbolic death of the old wicked man and his resurrection to newness of life. Let's go to Romans, the 6th chapter, the 3rd verse, and we'll begin to understand this fully. Romans, the 6th chapter, the 3rd verse, where it says, "Do you not know that as many of us as are baptized into Yeshua Messiah were baptized into his death? Therefore we were buried with him by baptism into death, so that as Christ was raised up from the dead by the glory of the Father, so even we also should walk in newness of life." That is our victory. Which brings us back to that word in 1 Peter 3:19 that we skipped, where it said, proclaimed to the men, or to the spirits. Most objective commentaries will note that the word in the Greek is G2784, ekruxin, or caruso, meaning in general to be a herald, to proclaim, to announce, to publish, to preach. Although it can be used as such, it does not necessarily mean specifically to preach the gospel to. So we may be dealing with a slight problem with the translation here. It could also mean to preach salvation to, but it could not, because Peter does not specifically say what Yeshua proclaimed or announced. To assume the preaching of the gospel in this particular case is not warranted. It's not necessary. The only clue we have of what he proclaimed appeared in the immediate text that said that he was made alive by the Spirit. If that's the case, then verse 19, and all of this is for those who are looking, it's in 1 Peter 3:19, and just kind of look through there, and I'm kind of trying to go word by word through this because it is kind of jumbled in the English translated from the Greek. If this is the case, verse 19 says simply that after Yeshua was resurrected, he ascended to heaven, proclaiming to the imprisoned evil spirits that he lived. That's all he needed to do. Because what that proved to them for all time, that once again, the demons failed. Verse 22 backs this interpretation. Who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God, angels and authorities and powers having been made subject to him. This agrees with many scriptures that speak of his exaltation over all things. For instance, Philippians, the 2nd chapter, the 9th verse. Philippians, the 2nd chapter, the 9th verse, where it says, "Therefore God has highly exalted him and has given him a name which is above every name, that at the name of Yeshua every knee shall bow, of heavenly ones and of earthly ones and of ones under the earth." You see, Yeshua's ascension to the throne of God proclaimed in its action itself, proclaimed his victory over death and over Satan and his demons. We can now safely return to the original truth of God that this passage explains the fate of the lost of humanity, because it actually does, just not in the way most people understand it. You see, Yeshua, while dead himself, did not bring the souls of the dead to salvation through preaching to them personally in some kind of nether world. Such a scenario is theologically ridiculous. The dead do not speak, cannot speak. However, when they rise, what they do speaks so much more profoundly to their position and calling than any word they could have said in death, in somebody's fever dream. However, his resurrection, as I said, did make salvation possible for the lost dead by living again. You see, he has broken the grip of death over mankind. Oh yeah? Prove it. 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter, the 20th verse. 1 Corinthians, the 15th chapter, the 20th verse, where it says, "But now Christ has risen from the dead and has become the first fruit of those who slept." That's anybody that slept at any time in period. Anyone. 21. "For since death is through man, and the resurrection of the dead is also through a man, for as in Adam all die, even so in Christ all will be made alive." Need more? Hebrews, the 2nd chapter, the 14th verse. Hebrews, the 2nd chapter, the 14th verse, where it says, "Since the children have partaken of flesh and blood, he also himself likewise partook of the same, that through death he might destroy him who had the power of death, that is, the devil, and deliver those who through fear of death were all their lives subject to bondage. For truly he did not take the nature of angels, but he took the seed of Abraham. Therefore in all things it behooved him to be made like his brothers, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make propitiation for the sins of his people." In other words, he had to stand there and justify and eliminate the sins that come after, because we're not perfect. He saw that with Judah and all the other 11 tribes. He saw that. That's why they get another chance. Because even through all that they did, the promise was made, so it must be kept. So don't think you replaced anyone. No, there's no replacement. This isn't replacement theology here. We don't do that. But this is to take the sins of all the people before the Father and cleanse them. But don't, again, think that you can just keep getting the same one dunked again and again and again and again. Can't happen. But as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, each category of the individuals will be resurrected in a very specific order. First Messiah, then his saints at his coming. Then the rest of the dead, as it says in Revelation 20:15. And lastly, the incorrigibly wicked. That's the ones who, I don't care what you say, the ones we talked about in the Bible study. They get their own special resurrection. They get to come up. Hey, guess what? Still believe that way? Yep. Take a walk. Right there, down that hallway right there. Well, don't worry about the light at the end. You'll fall in there, but it won't hurt long. Yeah, that's how that will work. The lost of humanity will rise, as well as the rest of the dead, in the great white throne judgment, and have the opportunity to hear and accept or reject the good news of salvation. This will, in many cases, be their first opportunity to receive God's calling, an opportunity that God will extend to every member of humanity. So when they say that, oh no, God is not fair, they have to understand the whole plan. Once you understand the whole plan, everyone gets a chance. But for many, this will be their, as I said, will be their first opportunity to receive God's calling, an opportunity that will extend, as I said, to every member of humanity. God is not callous by any means. He said it in perhaps the best known of all Bible verses, the one that everybody knows and doesn't seem to understand the fullness of. He asserts it clearly in John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. He will make sure that every human being has an opportunity to hear the gospel and have the choice to either enter into the kingdom or down that hallway right there. But you'll know clearly which is which. God's victory over death and over Satan was won through resurrection of his sinless Son, Yeshua, Messiah, and will eventually be proclaimed to all people of all ages. The knowledge of this should give us the strength to make it through the nonsense that is about to come on us all. And we don't know when. I'm not going to stand here, oh yeah, I know. No, I don't know when it's going to come. But the Bible says it's going to come, so we know it's coming. Be ready for it. How do we be ready? How can we be ready for it? Pray, fast, study, remain together, love each other. And when these things come, and believe me, I believe there are some elements that will not be revealed until that thing comes to the full. And at that point, I got a feeling we all will know if we've done this. But we will continue to pray, continue to remain in this word, and be warned, there's a lot of that word out here right now. So make sure. Even the Bibles are now becoming so compromised that there's some versions that maybe we should do that one again and just kind of go through these ones that are kind of problematic. And there's a lot of more of them now, so it's kind of hard to know every one of them. But just real quickly, I would stay away from the NIV, very quickly. And I would be very careful with any one minister's personal, this is my interpretation. Be very careful. And beyond that, it's just, it takes a little bit more knowledge of the book itself, which means the one you've got, continue to read it, continue to internalize it, understand it, and don't keep, oh, I need a new one. I need a different one. No, you need to understand the one you have. Internalize it. I almost want to go wish I had the time to go the book of Eli route with it. And just oh, I gave away the whole thing. I'm sorry. Anybody that haven't seen the book of Eli by now, I'm sorry, you pretty much have heard it anyway. He memorized the whole book. If you can do that, go for it. But that's not going to guarantee it. Memorizing it is cool. Understanding what it says is more important. So let's do that. God bless you all.